Good morning to everyone in the Asia part of the world, and good evening to the people in Latin America and North America. My name is David Romo, and I'm your host for this conference of the APROS Indigenous Knowledge Network. Uh, I am very happy to introduce our speaker today. Welcome, Veronica Figueroa, our Chilean companion this evening from the National University of Chile, if I'm not mistaken. And she's a Mapuche indigenous person that has served in a series of different roles. She has a postdoc position, a PhD from the University of Ramon Llull in Barcelona. And later, after that, she had two postdoctoral positions, one at the Latin American Studies in Stanford University, and also as a visiting scholar at the David Rockefeller Center of Latin American Studies at Harvard University. With that very impressive study background, she has served in several capacities besides a very ample production in the scientific realm with publications of in scientific journals as well as in books and chapters of different books. Her more recent job was tied to the Ministry of Education, in which she served as a Vice Minister for Higher Education, for the Higher Education Division. And currently, she's the President of the Council of Evaluation for the University of Chile. But as I have mentioned in our previous conferences, what makes very important the people that come and talk to us, it's the kindness in their hearts and the inspiration that they can serve to people by looking at their life paths and how our speakers have taken this opportunity of the doors that open through becoming part of higher education positions and studying hard to not only do things for themselves, but to serve people and to try to correct the wrongs that are so embedded into our societies, especially to people from minority populations like indigenous peoples. So I'm not going to spend more time telling you what Vero is all about, because she will do an excellent job telling us little bits of her life history, but especially trying to accomplish what we want to do through this series, which is to inspire young people to follow this path and serve as many people as possible, because once we get some knowledge, what we want to do is serve humankind and advance in that pathway. So Vero, muchísimas gracias for your presence tonight, and I'm looking forward to what you have to say. Please, if you have questions for Veronica's presentation, please write them in the chat. We will try to summarize some of your questions at the end. And yes, we're going to have a Q&A for about 10-15 minutes. So muchas gracias, Vero. Welcome to this forum.
Thank you so much, David, for the generosity of your presentation. Good night from Chile to all of you. I feel very happy and very proud to share this presentation tonight with you. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Could you see the presentation? Okay, thank you very much. First of all, say hello to all of you and Mari Compuche, Mari Compulamien. This is the greeting in Mapudungun, the language of the Mapuche people, the indigenous people to which I belong. Is from my identity as a Mapuche woman that I position myself as a person and an academic too. Therefore, my experiences and the different paths that I have taken have led me to the work agenda I am on today, and which I will present to you in this session. As the title of my presentation indicates, one of my main concerns is finding spaces for dialogue between the state and indigenous people. The governance approach has allowed me to make that connection, but it has also highlighted the tensions that exist when relations are not based on the rights of indigenous peoples. This is where I think intersectionality and interculturality make sense. When making this presentation, I wondered how I could explain to you the path that brought me here today and why I am interested in governance studies. I thought that this puzzle could be a good way to represent my path to becoming researcher, to becoming a Mapuche academic. And I think that is because for many indigenous people like me, our lives are puzzles. We try to make the pieces to fit together and give meaning to the world we inhabit. So I will divide my presentation into 4 moments, like pieces of the puzzle of my academic life. I want to talk about how I got to this field of research that I identify as my path to my identity. Then I'm going to talk about how I became a researcher and the analytic framework to do my research. Then which are my contribution to a better understanding about the proposal of indigenous people to a buen vivir, to a well-being, to a kume monien, we say in Mapudungun, from a governance perspective. And at the end, I want to talk about my dreams, which are my dreams for the future. My path toward my indigenous identity has many moments, some more difficult than others. Bad thing to be a Mapuche. Mala cosa ser Mapuche. My grandfather said once. I didn't understand much of the meaning of that phrase at that time because I was little, I was a child. But later, during an important part of my childhood and adolescence, this phrase made sense to me. Because being Mapuche, a Mapuche in the city, being a Mapuche woman, being a poor Mapuche person, being Mapuche wherever you are is always complex, is always difficult. It is not easy to understand. The history of dispossession is in our memory, the dispossession of our territory, of our identity, of our language. We face multiple forms of discrimination from a young age, even if we are not very aware of it, even if we are not very aware about this discrimination. Sometimes we feel ashamed of our identity, even if we didn't understand why, because discrimination happens often without us being aware of it. It's in the classroom, in the media, in everyday mockery. Being indigenous is associated with something negative. Indigenous are the savage, the uncultured, the lazy, the drunk. Of course, this led many Mapuches to hide their identity. change their surnames and deny all their history. Different investigation account for this, like an investigation led by a Mapuche researcher, Maria Cristina Yanquileo, entitled Cultural Identity in the Processes of Modernization, an Analysis of the Chains of Names in Mapuche Persons. This investigation shows that the main causes to change our names, our last names, are exclusion, are discrimination, and domination. When I entered university, I learned new things about my identity. I also found other people who, like me, sought to build a new path toward their identity as Mapuche. On this path, one day I saw an image that moved me. This photo, this image, shows a little girl who belonged to the Cahuéscar people, an indigenous people from Chilean Patagonia, in the arms of her mother, both kidnapped with other community members to be exhibited in a human zoo in Paris. That photo was taken just a few days before this little girl died due to travel conditions and a hard life in the zoo. She died in September of the year 1881. She was 2 years old. She was one of the many indigenous victims of the Chilean state. A victim of unprotection, of dehumanization, but also she was a victim of colonial knowledge. I was deeply moved when I saw this picture. And then I wondered if this also happened with my people, with the Mapuche people. Unfortunately, yes. This type of stories are also found among indigenous, the Mapuche people. In this photograph from 1883, we can observe 14 Mapuche people, 6 men, 4 women, and 4 children, taken from their land against their will and forced to go to France and exhibited in a human zoo. They were forced to leave their families in the name of Western knowledge, to be observed and researched by scientists from different places of Europe. We were exhibited also in museums in our own countries, like the case of Lonco Inacayal and his family in Argentina. He was dismembered to be studied in the name of science. When I saw his picture, I thought, did my ancestors experience similar situations? What were their sorrows and pains? All these experiences helped me to see the world as it really was to indigenous peoples. It was like a blindfold had been removed from my eyes. So the university was a crucial place to recover and live my indigenous identity. At that moment, I knew that this indigenous identity, my Mapuche identity, would become the center of my life. As an academic Mapuche woman, I believe that my research and teaching activities could contribute to the colonizing academic spaces and raising awareness about the rights of indigenous people and our incorporation into the state. So when I began my academic career, I knew I had to work in Western context, using Western research methodologies and strategies to position indigenous knowledge. My professional background is in public administration, in political science and government, and that is why my approach to my academic work is from the state, is considering the state, the political power, and the ways in which this political power has consolidated a colonial model of relationships with indigenous people. Studies or different research, different studies about the creation of Latin American state demonstrate that indigenous people were systematically excluded from the society projects. And following the European model, the Chilean state was influenced by the ideas of fraternity, freedom, and equality from the French Revolution, but these principles were used to justify the exclusion of indigenous people from the political and from the institutional spaces. This idea of one nation project was understood as a group of equal citizens who share the same language, the same history, the same values, and even the same religion. People who look for a shared future, the same future with the same idea of what is valued. And in that way, the education system was the first device to install the idea of a single nation. In school, these citizens, these equal citizens, will be educated as Chilean citizens, and indigenous people will be obligated to attend and learn the language, the values, the religion of this new nation. 200 years later, in Chile, there are still no spaces for the recognition of our collective rights. We don't have political representation at any level of the state. We don't have a Ministry of Indigenous Affairs or an institution with the authority to formulate indigenous public policies, among other things. As you know, we have this process to try to build a new constitution that failed. So we are in the same place. We don't have any kind of recognition in our Chilean state. As I said before, the fight for territory has been a permanent demand. This image shows a map of the ancestral Mapuche territory. The striped parts show the territory occupied by the Spanish crown, and all the rest belongs to the Mapuche people. And this belongs to the Mapuche people not because a paper said that, just because it had always been that way. Mapuche institution, our authorities, our ceremonies, our economic exchange, among others, are defined by the characteristics of our territory. And this is why we say there are ancestral territorial identities in the Mapu, the word that we use to call our territory. And historical evidence shows that the indigenous territory was approximately 5 million hectares, which today are no more than 500. Today, much of this territory is in the hands of forestry companies. This map is also very dramatic, I think. It shows the advance of forestry companies in Mapuche territories in the last decades. This map shows the Mapuche communities in pink and the pine and eucalyptus plantations of forestry companies in the ancestral territory, in the Mapuche ancestral territory, are in green. So you can see how these companies are occupying a lot of territory of indigenous people. aided also by state policies. Forestry plantations expanded from 2 million hectares in 1997 to almost 3 million in 2015. So it's a very dramatic situation, not only the public policies in Chile, but also the conflict relation with this kind of industry. The intensive land use and massive planting of exotic species have degraded much of the territory, endangering ecosystems. Mining, forestry, hydroelectric, and salmon companies, among others, are installed in Mapuche lands with negative consequences to the environment. For example, the forestry industry plant pines and eucalyptus because they have faster production times, but also they degrade the land. As a result of the climate emergency, it is highly likely that the dispute over territories and their resources will intensify. The increasing extreme weather events, such as large fires, droughts, increased temperatures, are now presented in additional difficulties to deep structural problems. In fact, according to the latest UNDP Human Development Report, Chile meets 7 of the 9 conditions of vulnerability indicated by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, being classified as a highly vulnerable to climate change impacts. Chile's development model is based on the exploitation of its natural resources, generate significant gaps, especially in the protection of priority terrestrial ecosystem, and the risk of the number of species falling into endangered categories. This form, of course, of a relationship with the territories is contrary to the life principle of indigenous people. And of course, this has increased conflicts with the territories, increased conflict, and led to the emergence of new indigenous movements that are demanding their right to return stolen lands. However, the state has not sought new forms of relations with the Mapuche people. Considering this, the complexity of these relationships and the state's lack of understanding of the aspiration of indigenous people, I wonder, is it possible to move towards a governance model that recognizes indigenous people as key actors in the future? What are the rules of the game that should be changed? How do we begin a path toward intercultural governance? It is possible to decolonize the state, this nation state. This and another question becomes the focus of my academic agenda, both in teaching and in research too. And this is how I seek to contribute to the construction of a new way of governance that respect the right of indigenous people. And as a part of this puzzle, I try to wonder and try to seek to be a contribution to my people from my academic research and from my academic work. According to the 27th population census, 12.8% of the population in Chile, more than 2 million people in Chile, identify themselves as part of an indigenous people. We have 10 officially recognized indigenous peoples in our country: Mapuche, Aymara, Rapa Nui, Licanantay, Quechua, Coya, Chango, Diaguita, Cahuéscar, Yagán, and Selknam. However, beyond confirming their presence, the Chilean state has done little to advance a relationship that respects indigenous rights. We have some different data that support this asseveration. For example, in the case of poverty, 18% of the indigenous population is poor, compared to 11% of the non-indigenous population. There has been a gradual loss of indigenous language, even though a bilingual intercultural education program was implemented in the 90s. 78% of the indigenous population does not speak or understand their own language. And finally, in health, for example, different studies show higher rates of infant mortality in the indigenous population. So is it possible? I think no. I wonder, is it possible to find new forms of coexistence? And to answer this question, I began working on this concept, using this concept of governance, no? A concept from built from a Western perspective, and trying to build a new analytical framework from indigenous perspectives. Governance can be understood as the set of institutions, processes, and conventions in a society that determine how power is exercised, how decisions are made, and how various interests are responded to. However, it is important to note that governance is not a neutral concept. Rather, represents the interests, values, and principles of the dominant societies, excluding, of course, groups that have been unable to influence the definition of this rule of the game. And this is due to different elements. I could identify at least 3 different dimensions that are important when we talk about indigenous people and their relationship with Chilean state in our case. In the first plate, we can find this structural dimension. In this structural dimension, for example, we can find the very design of the state, the values and principles of the state that are that influence the way in this state thinks, and the way in this state design their institutions. So we can find this second level called institutional and political dimension. And in this level, we can find how the powers of the state are defined, the criteria for accessing to the power, the mechanism of participation and representation. And at the end, we have a more concrete level, a more specific level called this administrative and management dimension, where these values, this principle, this idea, or these biases also operate. So governance must be studied because I think we need to know how it can help make democratic ideals about inclusion, empowerment, participation, and recognition of indigenous people make reality that recognition, and what is limiting also the participation of indigenous people in the life of the state. Advancing towards a formalization of intercultural governance is key, since in this way, the role played by each actor, their resources, their influences and interest, as well as power asymmetries could be evidenced. With this, I think it is possible to advance in identify the rules to be which rules are needed to be modified, or the strategies that we have to accomplish to reduce the gaps or exclusion of indigenous people and other groups of the society. And I think in that way, interculturality becomes a principle that can influence the transformation of all this institutionality, and favoring new forms of participation and political representation. But of course, an intercultural governance is not enough. We must consider the intersection that generates other kind of discrimination. For example, different studies showed the limited participation of indigenous women in power roles, the biases that non-indigenous decision makers still have about indigenous people or about indigenous women, and these kind of imaginaries that tend to position indigenous women as inferior. In that way, an intersectional, like this kind of street, that cross from an intersectional perspective, it is important to articulate the relationship between gender, race, and coloniality in governance space, because the oppression that arise from race, from gender, and class are important axes of analysis to characterize indigenous women reality. And for that reason, I think that it is necessary to continue opening research agendas to provide better answers to these challenges, contributing to a better problematization of these phenomena. And this implies, I think, revealing new dimensions, such as the role of indigenous movement, the progress in recognition of the indigenous people right, more spaces for indigenous women's participation, construct political representation, among others. And I think that it is crucial to advance a research agenda to suggest recommendations to the academic, but also to the practitioner world. And in this field, I have the opportunity to develop several publications trying to contribute to generate answers to this question. In my research, I have sorry. I have the opportunity. I'm so sorry. I have the opportunity I'm sorry. I have the opportunity to talk, to build, to try to discuss about these issues, this problem, I think that all these kind of things that are pressing for a new kind of governance in Chile. And also, it's important to say that we have a lot to work to do. No, we don't have all the answers, and I think that the university and the academia have the responsibility to contribute to this kind of try to discover how to solve this problem. At the last, I think, and finally, I want to share with you which are my dreams for the future, no, from this contribution, from this research agenda, from this academic work. I would like to share with you which are this dream, no, the dream from the future. And for that, I would like to end this presentation with this image, with this picture. If I asked you, what do you see in this image? I don't know what you can see, you can watch in this image. Probably the most common answer will be that you see a Mapuche woman, no, contemplating the nature, contemplating this lake, the mountain, with maybe a child you can see in this image. However, this image shows a Mapuche woman visiting a flooded ancestral cemetery to build a dam. And this happened in the late 90s in southern Chile, where a group of Mapuche communities confronted the power of hydroelectric companies, but also the Chilean state policies. And I think that is evident that this image, this photograph, shows how the struggle ended. So I think that this kind of situation, this kind of situation that indigenous and Mapuche people, no, are confronting and living, are part of the incentive for me to try to contribute, no, with my academic work, with my in the University of Chile, try to build a society more equitable, more egalitarian. And I think, or I have an important maybe question, no? How do we want to be remembered in the future? How will we honor our existence and that of those who follow us, no? How we will honor the next generation. And I think that it's important, let us not forget that all of us, indigenous and non-indigenous people, one day will be the ancestors. And for that reason, it is important try to act with the generosity, trying to respect our own ancestor, but always thinking that one day will be the ancestor of the next generation. So I think that we have a lot of work to do, and I feel very honored today to have the opportunity to share with you these ideas, this work, but also the dreams that we have to try to build a better world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica. This has been a very educational and interesting source of more questions that we would like to ask you, and I hope that we have enough time to solve them. Adrian Little, our head of this working group, wants to ask you a question, Vero. So, Adrian, go ahead.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Vero. It's a great talk. I really enjoyed it. I want to ask you a question as a political scientist myself, to another political scientist. So it seems to me that all disciplines in the colonial university need to, if they're serious about Indigenous knowledge, need to reconsider their concepts, their methods, and I'm interested in whether political science actually is a discipline which is equipped, as it stands, to deal with the kinds of issues you raise. So I'm intrigued. I understand why, as a political scientist, you use the analytical framework that you do, but I also wonder whether concepts such as governance, rights, representation that you mention are actually capable of delivering the kind of change that you want to see.
That is a very good question, but because I think that when we work with this Western concept, with this Western framework, like state, the institution, the way in that our laws, our political process are taken, I think that also when indigenous knowledges have not the opportunity to discuss in equal condition with this Western knowledge, so it's difficult. And also in Chile, because we don't have the, Chile is one of the countries that the recognition of indigenous rights are less, we don't have any advance, I think. We have a regular law from 1993 that recognize our existence not as indigenous peoples. This law recognizes us ethnic groups. So I think that these asymmetries are very barriers to try to put our own analytical framework in academic space. I think that this kind of concept, for me, governance, always generate attention. I struggle with the concept of governance because governance suppose that a state that put these rules, these principles, but with the participation of private sectors and the society, and all these actors, they don't have the equal power. And indigenous people are have the less opportunities to put in political spaces their position. But also, I think that maybe in this time, the time that we are living, this kind of concept help us acting like a knee, a rodilla, knee, like a knee, to articulate this different knowledge. Maybe the next generation of indigenous academics find new ways of try to make this concept dialogue, putting our own concept, our own ideas, our own epistemologies. But I think that we have attention to when we use this kind of model. But in the Chilean case, I think that help us, as I said, in our constitutional discussion, even when the people reject our proposition, I think that this kind of a concept, governance, laws, rights, help us to try to discuss with the society that knows so little about our existence. Yes, but it's interesting, this kind of tension with this concept, no? I think that governance is an elastic concept that help us to put different, it's like an umbrella concept, I think, that help us to put our demands maybe in discussion with other concepts.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now I start thinking a little bit of it was a surprise just for me right now. I thought that the total population of Chile was very much twice or more than the Ecuadorian population, since you are such a huge country compared to Ecuador. And listening to you, I'm very much impressed that it seems that the advancement of indigenous movements in Chile have not gotten enough hold inside the government. So my question, thinking in these terms, is how are the indigenous people organized? Do they have individual coalitions for each of the nations? Have they gotten to the position of putting a political party that unites indigenous people in Chile? How often do you see indigenous people in Congress or in government positions? Since you've been in one, how easy it is to have indigenous people in government positions at the local and the national level? So three questions.
Very good question, because we are more than almost 2 million of people in Chile. The 85% of all indigenous people are Mapuche, so we are the majority in indigenous people. But I think that this is a long story. I think that we have to tell a long story about our relationship with the Chilean state. Because in all our political history, never we have the opportunity to be recognized at any formal level. We don't have any constitution, no one political constitution that recognize our existence or recognize our rights. We have been obligated to go to Chilean schools, learn about Chilean history, learn their language, live in a Chilean way. So I think that this almost 200 years of coexistence with this state were very problematic to us. And I think for that reason, and because we are a nation and we are not equal inside indigenous Mapuche, inside the Mapuche people, we are different and think differently. We have, I think, maybe three kind of position. One, we have this movement with this Mapuche movement that with the return of democracy have a very, very powerful, mainly trying to resist to this institution, to this political institution that not recognize our right, that not return our land, that support these companies' installation in our territory. So this movement like Alianza, el Consejo de Todas las Tierras, like Coordinadora Arauco Mayeco, this kind of movement that broke the relationship with the state and said, we are a nation, we don't need this state, and the only way to confront this state is through using the violence. But I think that this strategy are not not represent the majority. We have a very important part of the Mapuche people that we are trying to fight through institutional by the institutional rules. For example, we have some indigenous people that competing in electoral processes, but not in indigenous party. We don't have any kind of indigenous party, political party. For example, we have two indigenous women, deputy indigenous women, but they were elected not because they are indigenous, just because they are part of political parties. And I think that still the racism and biases are very strong in our country. We are mestizos, but I think that the Chilean people have an imaginary that we are white, that we are European, and that that kind of ideas are impeding that we can, and also as Adrian said, our institutions are designed to impedir, to
Prevent.
¿ah?
Prevent.
To
Impedir.
prevent, yes, to prevent our that we can confirm political parties. And I think that is a reason that we are why we don't have Mapuches or indigenous representation in political spaces. And also there are a part of indigenous population that not necessarily feels indigenous. I think that there are maybe a kind of sensibility about that. But our system, our school system, our curricula, our media, our public spaces are not designed to try to motivate. I think that maybe in this last political discussion about our constitution, I think that was an important opportunity to put our voices and our bodies in the media and try to explain what we are thinking about the state, what is a plurinational state, what we are trying to promote when we talk about reserved seats, for example. But it's not easy. One of the main causes of to say that the people reject the constitutional project, the media and conservative sectors in Chile said, was our proposition, that this plurinación or talk about interculturality, that generate scare in people, so we were the guilty that why these projects were rejected. And we are trying to recover. I think we are trying to recover to that to that situation, and trying to collaborate and to put again our rights and our ideas in all these spaces. So for that, this kind of spaces is so important for us, because to us, make academia work is not only in the world of our university. We need to change the way of thinking of the next generation. We are confronting in critical issues today. The climate emergency are putting our life as human in danger. So I think that indigenous people, we have so many answers. Maybe if we have the opportunity to put that ideas and that answers in different spaces. We are collaborating to try to build a better world.
Vero, thank you very much for your conference today. And I'm happy that I throw that question to you, because not only I was eager to hear your answer, but it's very important for many of the people in the audience to realize that some things that we already take for granted are not happening everywhere as they need to happen. And with that said, David is going to post the invitation for our next conference next month. And we will have Professor Rochelle Pilani Kaola from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, talking about faculty stories on the technology use I'm sorry, Native Hawaiian faculty stories on the technology use. I want to invite everybody that attended this evening and this morning our conference. I want to thank everybody for participating, and I want to thank Adrian and Noel and David and Adriana for all the contribution and help that you do for us to have this series. Thank you very much, and see you next time in a month.